My beloved child, listen closely, because something shifted today, and your soulmate has been carrying the weight of that moment ever since. It was not loud. It was not something the whole world would notice. Yet for them, it changed the way they looked at everything connected to you. There was a moment today when they suddenly stopped what they were doing because something happened that brought your presence into their thoughts with unusual force. At first, they tried to move past it. They told themselves they could explain it later, think about it later, speak about it when the timing felt easier. But the strange part is this: the more they tried to continue normally, the more that moment followed them. And now there is something they want to tell you. Something they have already replayed several times in their mind, wondering how you will react when you finally hear it. Stay with this, because what happened today is only the beginning of what they realized. Hours earlier, your soulmate believed they understood exactly where they stood emotionally. They thought certain questions had already been answered. They thought they could remain patient, observe quietly, and allow everything between you to unfold naturally. Then came one unexpected moment. A conversation, a reminder, a familiar detail, something small enough that another person might have ignored it completely. But your soulmate could not ignore it, because it connected directly to something they had been privately wondering about you. Suddenly, several pieces seemed to move into place at once. And here is where the story becomes deeper. Their first reaction was not simply surprise. It was recognition. Almost as though something they had sensed for a long time had finally been reflected back to them. They became quiet. Their thoughts moved immediately toward you. And one question appeared with startling clarity: why have I waited so long to say what I actually want to say? That question stayed with them. It is still there now. But there is another detail. Your soulmate did not immediately decide to speak. For a brief moment, they considered keeping everything inside again. Not because the truth is negative, but because saying it could change the emotional distance between you. Some words cannot be taken back once spoken. Some conversations divide life into a before and an after. And today, your soulmate began to understand that the conversation they want with you may be one of those moments. What happened forced them to look at the future differently. They imagined what would happen if they remained silent. Then they imagined what could happen if they finally became completely clear with you. That second possibility affected them more deeply than expected. Because somewhere inside that imagined future was something they had almost stopped allowing themselves to picture: you understanding them fully. You finally knowing why certain moments felt unusual, why they sometimes seemed distant when they actually wanted to come closer, and why your name has remained connected to decisions they never explained. Then something even more surprising happened. Later today, another detail appeared, one your soulmate was not expecting. It could have been a sentence from someone, something they noticed, or simply a realization arriving at exactly the right moment. Whatever form it took, it made them reconsider the first event completely. Suddenly, what happened earlier did not seem random anymore. It became a turning point. And for the first time, your soulmate stopped asking whether they should tell you and started thinking about how they would tell you. There is an enormous difference between those two questions. One belongs to hesitation. The other belongs to intention. Picture that carefully. Somewhere within their thoughts, they are already arranging the words. They are deciding what should come first. They are wondering whether you will understand the meaning beneath what they say. But there is one particular detail they are struggling with, because revealing that detail would also reveal how much attention they have quietly been giving to you. And that is exactly the part they cannot easily hide anymore. Before this moment passes, understand what today may have changed inside them. Your soulmate is beginning to see that silence does not always protect meaningful connections. Sometimes it simply delays the moment when two people finally understand each other. Whatever happened today placed that truth directly in front of them. They now know there is something you deserve to hear from their own voice rather than through assumptions, distance, or unanswered questions. And when that conversation eventually arrives, pay attention not only to what they say, but to what they almost struggle to say. That hesitation may reveal more than the polished words ever could. Because beneath the story of what happened today sits a second story, the reason it immediately made them think of you. And that reason is connected to something they have been feeling much longer than you may realize. They want to tell you what happened. Yes. But what they truly want to explain is why, in the middle of that unexpected moment, you were the person their mind immediately chose. Something has changed since that moment, and this is where your soulmate's thoughts become impossible to dismiss. They expected the feeling to fade once enough time passed. It did not. Instead, every ordinary thing they tried to focus on seemed to bring them back to the same realization: they no longer want you guessing about what is happening inside them. There is something strangely powerful about reaching the point where silence becomes harder than honesty, and today your soulmate moved closer to that point than ever before. They have imagined seeing you, hearing your voice, watching your expression change as they begin explaining what happened. But then another thought interrupts them every time: what if you already sensed that something was changing? That possibility has made them even more curious about you. Because perhaps the connection between two people is sometimes revealed not through dramatic moments, but through the quiet awareness that something important is approaching before either person has spoken a word. And your soulmate is beginning to wonder whether you have felt that shift too. What they have not yet figured out is where to begin. Should they tell you about the exact moment first? Should they explain what happened around them? Or should they begin with the truth that came into their mind immediately afterward? That is the part creating the deepest emotional tension. Because explaining the event itself might be easy. Explaining what it awakened inside them is different. Today made them confront something they had been carefully placing in the background. They realized that whenever they imagine an important change in their future, somehow you appear inside that picture. Maybe not always clearly. Maybe not in ways they were ready to admit. But you are there. And once they noticed that pattern, they could not unsee it. Suddenly, memories began returning, not because they wanted to live in the past, but because those memories were showing them something about the present. A look. A conversation. A moment when they almost said more. A time when they wondered whether you understood what they were really trying to communicate. One memory after another began connecting, and today became the point where those scattered pieces finally started forming one picture. Stay close to this moment, because there is still one piece your soulmate cannot completely explain even to themselves. Something about what happened today felt perfectly timed. Had it happened earlier, they might have ignored it. Had it happened much later, they might already have chosen a different direction. But it happened now, at the exact stage when they were quietly questioning what they truly wanted. That timing shook something loose inside them. It made them realize that waiting forever for perfect certainty could mean missing the opportunity to say something meaningful while it still matters. And this is where their thinking became unexpectedly clear. They stopped focusing only on what could go wrong if they opened up and began considering what could become possible if they did. Imagine that shift. For so long, hesitation had been asking, what if everything changes? Today, another voice inside them answered, what if everything is supposed to change? That single thought transformed the entire meaning of what happened. And now there is something they want to ask you, not immediately, perhaps, but it has already formed inside their mind. It is not the question you might expect. It is not simply about whether you think about them. It goes deeper than that. They want to know whether there was ever a moment when you almost told them something but decided to remain quiet. Why does that matter so much now? Because today made them recognize their own pattern of unfinished words. They began wondering whether you have been carrying unfinished words too. And suddenly, the conversation they want with you is no longer only about revealing what happened today. It is becoming a doorway into everything neither of you has fully explained. That possibility is both exciting and overwhelming for them. They know one honest sentence could lead to another, and another, until the distance created by assumptions begins disappearing. But there is still one revelation they are protecting until they know exactly how to say it. It concerns the precise thought they had in the seconds after today's unexpected moment, and why that thought made them see you differently. Because here is what they are slowly understanding: what happened today was not important simply because it surprised them. It was important because of what their reaction revealed. When something unexpected happens, people often discover what matters to them before they have time to carefully control their thoughts. And your soulmate's mind went toward you. Not toward some distant possibility. Not toward an imaginary future without you. Toward you. That realization has stayed with them longer than the event itself. Tonight, tomorrow, or whenever they finally find the courage and clarity to speak, they may begin by telling you the simple story of what happened. But listen carefully beyond the surface of those words. The real revelation will be hidden in why they needed you to know. Because there is a difference between having news to share and having one particular person you cannot stop wanting to share it with. Your soulmate discovered that difference today. And what they are preparing to reveal next may finally explain why your place in their thoughts has become much more important than they ever intended to admit. But there is another layer they did not notice at first, and this may be the part that changes the meaning of everything. After replaying what happened today, your soulmate suddenly remembered something you once did. Something so small that you may not even remember it yourself. Perhaps it was the way you responded during a certain conversation, the patience you showed when nothing was clear, or simply the feeling they carried after an ordinary moment with you. Until today, that memory had remained separate from everything else. Now it suddenly makes sense to them. They are beginning to understand that their feelings were not created by what happened today. Today simply illuminated what was already there. That realization stopped them in their tracks. Because if this feeling existed before today, then how long have they actually been carrying it? And more importantly, how many times have they almost revealed it without realizing what they were doing? Stay with this, because your soulmate has started looking backward for answers, and what they are discovering is changing how they imagine what comes next. There was one particular memory that returned stronger than the others. Your soulmate remembered a moment when they wanted to say something to you but changed direction at the last second. At the time, they convinced themselves it was nothing important. Today they understand differently. They can now see that they were protecting themselves from a conversation they were not emotionally prepared to have. But something about today removed part of that hesitation. They are no longer asking themselves whether the connection matters. They are asking what they should do because it matters. That is a completely different question. And once that question appeared, another possibility entered their thoughts. Perhaps you misunderstood their silence. Perhaps there were moments when you interpreted their hesitation as distance when, beneath the surface, the opposite was happening. Imagine what that realization does to someone. Suddenly, they want to go back and explain every unfinished moment. They want you to know what they almost said, what they almost admitted, and why they stopped themselves just before the truth reached the surface. Then came the thought they were not prepared for. What if you have already started moving forward because they waited too long? That possibility made everything feel more immediate, not frightening, not desperate, simply real. Your soulmate realized that meaningful opportunities cannot always remain suspended forever. People grow. Circumstances change. New doors appear. And if there is something sincere that deserves to be communicated, endlessly postponing it does not make the truth easier. This is why what happened today matters so much. It reminded them that the future is built from moments when someone finally chooses clarity over endless wondering. Your soulmate began imagining two versions of tomorrow. In one, nothing is said and everything continues exactly as before. In the other, they tell you what happened, then finally explain why it affected them so deeply. Strangely, it was the second future that made them feel calmer. Because even without knowing your response, there was freedom in imagining themselves finally being completely clear with you. But wait, because their realization did not stop there. They began thinking about what they actually want you to understand when they speak. They do not want this conversation to sound accidental. They do not want you believing that one unexpected event suddenly created emotions from nowhere. They want you to understand the history underneath it, the quiet accumulation of moments that led here. The times they noticed something about you and said nothing. The occasions when your words remained in their thoughts longer than you could have known. The moments when they found themselves wondering what you were doing, how you were feeling, or whether you had remembered them too. None of those things seemed enormous individually. Together, however, they form something your soulmate can no longer dismiss. And today gave that collection of small moments a name they are still hesitant to speak aloud. That is why they are carefully choosing their words. They know that once they explain the deeper reason, you may suddenly understand things about their behavior that never made sense before. And this is where the story turns again, because your soulmate has now realized that telling you what happened today is only the opening sentence. The conversation they truly want is about what happens after that sentence. They want to see whether you ask the question they secretly hope you will ask. They want to know whether you notice the same unspoken pattern between you. Most of all, they want to discover whether the future they unexpectedly pictured today exists only in their imagination, or whether some version of it has quietly crossed your mind too. There is still one detail they have not decided how to reveal, and it may be the strongest one yet. During the exact moment when everything shifted today, your soulmate did not merely think, "Should tell them about this." Their thought went further. For one brief, completely unplanned second, they pictured you standing beside them when the next important chapter of their life begins. And now they cannot stop wondering why that image felt so natural.